Welcome to Crime Maze. In this video we are going to talk about the 5 murder mysteries in North Carolina. Before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to Crime Maze channel for future updates. Each of these stories, based on legend, folklore, and reality, remains a mystery to this day. Here are 5 of North Carolina's most infamous murders and mysteries, dating back to the 1500s. Number 5. Bladenboro Fire Poltergeist, Bladenboro, 1932. Mrs. Charles Williamson was an ordinary housewife until her garment caught fire for no apparent reason one day. Her daughter and husband were fortunate enough to put out the fire. The family wondered what had happened because there was no flame source around. Their efforts to put the incident behind them came to a halt when a pair of shoes in Mrs. Williamson's closet caught fire and burned to a crisp. A bed and curtains caught fire during the next 4 days. Other spurts of fire would arise, enveloping objects in blue flames and burning them to a crisp. The flames could not be put out until all of the goods engulfed had been totally consumed. There were no injuries to family members, and the fires were totally extinguished after 4 days. The strange incident was probed by arsonists, electricians, and even the police. There was never a clear explanation found. Number 4. The Below Murders, Windsor, 1993. A 20-year-old cold case still haunts each resident in the tranquil little town of Windsor. A terrifying call was received by cops on a hot summer night in June. An unidentified assailant lurked inside this small grocery shop and waited for the store to close. The cleaning staff and employees were caught off guard and taken at gunpoint as they began their nighttime tasks. After being bound and gagged, each victim was transported to the meat-cutting chamber. Their bodies were stacked there while the killer fired rounds until he ran out of ammunition. He then took a knife and stabbed each of the victims. Before dying, one of the injured victims managed to phone the police. When the cops arrived, they were unprepared for what they saw. According to eyewitness accounts, bodies were found in mounds of blood, with one victim having a knife stabbed through his back. One person was unhurt, but was said to be saturated in blood and presumed dead when first discovered. 3 persons died as a result of the accident. The most bizarre aspect is that no one understands why or who might have perpetrated such a heinous act. Shortly later, the Below was turned off. Police are still investigating and trying to solve this heinous crime 20 years later. Number 3. Debbie Wolfe, Fayetteville, 1985. Debbie Wolfe, a young nurse from Fayetteville, went missing on Christmas Eve. Her family had divers investigate the family lake behind her house before the authorities got involved. Debbie's body was discovered in a barrel in the lake, dressed in clothing that did not belong to her. Her home had gone missing before she vanished, and the barrel she was discovered in was missing as well. Despite her family's pleas that it was plainly a murder, officials ruled the case as an accident. Nobody knows what happened to Debbie Wolfe to this day. 2 males were observed asking her about romantic involvement where she worked before she vanished. Why was it decided that this was an accident? Number 2. The Lost Colony of Roanoke, late 1580s. 117 men, women, and children swam ashore on Roanoke Island in 1587. The first permanent settlement in the Americas was established by the settlers. Among the settlers recruited by Sir Walter Raleigh were British ally Indian Chief Manteo, John White, and his pregnant daughter Eleanor Dare. Shortly after they started establishing their colony, Eleanor gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first child born on American soil. John made the decision to go to England with the promise of returning with supplies. John returned 3 years later, on his granddaughter's 3rd birthday, to find that everyone had vanished. The initial colony had been abandoned and had become covered with bushes. Aside from 2 engravings, John had no clear indication of where his family had vanished. He discovered the word Croton engraved on one of the palisades, as well as the letters CRO inscribed on a nearby tree. John couldn't see if his family had gone inland or if anyone was still alive because of the approaching hurricane. John went to England and died a few years later without ever learning what happened to the 118 settlers. The Lost Colony is one of North Carolina's most infamous and well-known unsolved mysteries to this day. Some people claim to have seen Virginia Dare as a white doe, while others say the colonists were killed by Indians. Because no one knows, this enigma has become well-known legend. Number 1. Alan and Terry Westerfield, Fayetteville, 1964. The case of these 2 young boys is still the state's oldest unsolved missing persons case. Alan, 6, and Terry, 11, were dropped off by their father at the famed Broadway movie theater in Fayetteville on September 12. Some staff believe they saw the youngsters, but others say they didn't. Their mother had a reputation for being harsh, telling the boys to wait in the theater until she arrived. Unfortunately, the boys were not in the theater and could not be found. Hurricane Dora disrupted the essential 48-hour search time. When the story went viral, reports came in from all over the country, from Mississippi to Arizona, but no significant leads were ever discovered. The lads are now 58 and 62 years old. Their family is still dealing with the unresolved anguish, and no one understands what went wrong. Here are a couple more. The Legend of Peter Dromgoole and Dromgoole Rock. 1832, UNC Chapel Hill. Nobody knows what happened to Peter Dromgoole, a UNC Chapel Hill student. The main plot revolves around Peter and another student who were both head over heels in love with a young girl named Fanny. They concluded, as guys do, that a duel would be the best way to determine who would actually win Fanny's love. Fanny's true love, Peter, was assassinated and buried behind a rock where Fanny and Peter would meet in secret. On the rock, his blood stain is believed to still be visible. Fanny died of a shattered heart the following summer. Her and Peter are said to haunt the area and Gimhall Castle, according to legend. Stranger still, prior to his death, Peter wrote a peculiar letter to his family in Virginia, alleging he was going to do something dreadful that would cause them tremendous anguish, and that if this happened, they would never hear from him again. Peter's uncle rushed to UNC to check on the young guy, but when he arrived, he discovered that he was missing. He'd fled, leaving only a few pieces of clothing behind. Maybe it has something to do with the lovers' conflict, but anyway, it's a legend that continues to haunt UNC Chapel Hill. The Legend of Payne Road, Rural Hall. Nobody can agree on exactly what transpired on Payne Road. Everyone can agree, though, that it's spooky, haunted, and a true North Carolina legend. The haunting of Payne Road is linked to various accounts. The first and most well-known is Edward Payne's ownership of a vast slave plantation on this property. When he learned that his daughter was pregnant with one of the slave's children, he murdered the slave and went insane, claiming to worship the devil. When Payne discovered another daughter had done the same, he went insane, slaying the slave and then his entire family in a fit of wrath. Payne set fire to the plantation, killing all of the slaves that remained. Some even claim that Payne converted to Satanism and sacrificed his slaves as wicked symbols. The narrative of Edward Payne is the most common one told about Payne Road, although there are two others. The second is about a young man who didn't quite make the curve and crashed his car. He was believed to have crashed near the site of a chapel where Edward Payne was said to have worshipped Satan. The most tragic aspect of this story is that the young man died a slow, agonizing death while onlookers stood by, stared, and did nothing but watch the car burn in flames. If you travel down Payne Road late at night, it is reported that you can see the Ford car's circular lights following you. The final and most time-conflicting story is about a guy who lived with his family in the farmhouse on the site during the 1800s. After yet another fight with his wife, the guy concluded that their troubles were caused by their children. He shackled his wife to a chair, gagged her, and confined her to the living room. He brought his children upstairs and cut their throats one by one, asking them to say goodnight to their mother before taking them to the living room and instructing them to say goodnight to their mother. The guy made the decision to throw his last child, his newborn daughter, into the well. The man's wife had managed to flee while reaching the well. She went after her husband and snatched their baby girl from his clutches. Her husband, however, intercepted her at the bridge and cut her off with his knife. He then threw his newborn girl into the well, which was heartbreaking. Finally, he committed suicide by hanging himself from the bridge. Legend has it that if you drive to the bridge, pull over to the side, and whistle Dixie, the woman's spirit will materialize, clutching her head in her hands and approaching your car. If you move towards the old house, you can also hear a baby sobbing from the well. Needless to say, all three stories are horrific, heartbreaking, and unsettling in equal measure. So, tonight I'm sleeping with the light on. What are your thoughts on these riddles, folklore, and tales, and which ones did I overlook? What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.